Do we have sound? Greetings, everybody. Tonight, we're going to talk about stupidity. This is the power. We're going to talk about the Power of Stupidity by Giancarlo Livraghi in June of 1986. This seems to predate the Dunning-Kruger work by a little bit, along the same kind of lines, though. This was originally written in 1996 as a special report for entropy gradient reversals that asked me for some comments on human stupidity. I was surprised when it was translated into Spanish in 1998. Later, several readers asked me to publish an Italian version, which I did in September 2001. This version is revised in December 2006, also in relation to several things, blah, 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 blah. The study of stupidity can be seen as a branch of a more extended subject. Why things go wrong. See Murphy, Parkinson, Peter, and Sequoia. But it could also be the other way around. All the behaviors that lead to the wrong decisions can be seen as ways of being stupid, and none, dismal as they may be, have such devastating effects on human stupidity. I've always been fascinated with stupidity, my own, of course, and that's a big enough cause of anxiety. But things get much worse when one has a chance to find out how big people may take big decisions. Bigly. Like what prompts a orange tinted executive officer to drop a bomb that they've never even tossed before. Or threaten nuclear war with North Korea. That seems like a really stupid thing to be doing. There was something about how stupid that was in my news feed earlier even. We generally tend to blame awful decisions on intentional perversity, astute mischievousness, megalomania, etc. They are there, all right, but any careful study of history or current events leads to the invariable conclusion that the single biggest source of terrible mistakes is sheer stupidity. This fact is quite widely understood by anyone who's had a chance to look into the subject. One of the ways in which it is summarized is known as Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by stupidity. Clumsiness. I've hurt more people by being clumsy than on purpose. The same concept was confirmed by Robert Heinlein in a shorter and simple statement. Never underestimate the power of human stupidity. And then George Carlin took that one step further as never underestimate the power of stupid people in large numbers. The origin of Hanlon's razor is uncertain. It can be considered as a corollary to Finagel's law of dynamic negatives, which is similar to Murphy's law. It is inspired by classic Occam's razor, and it's equally sharp. Hanlon is probably a phonetic variation on the name of Robert Heinlein, who had stated that concept in his novel Logic of Empire in 1941. When stupidity combines with other factors, as happens quite often, the results can be devastating. A fact that surprises me, or does it, is the very little amount of study dedicated to such an important subject. There are university departments for the mathematical complexities in the movements of Amazonian ants or the medieval history of Purim Island, but I have never heard of any foundation or board of trustees supporting any studies of stupidology. Well, there's Dunning-Kruger. I think they're funded by somebody. I have found few good books on the subject. The three deserve to be specifically quoted. One I read when I was a teenager but never forgot is called A Short Introduction to the History of Human Stupidity by Walter B. Pitkin of Columbia University, and was published in 1934. I found it by chance many years ago while browsing around old bookshelves, and much to my delight, I still have it. Old as it is, it's still a very good book. Some of Professor Pitkin's observations appear extraordinarily correct 70 years later. Now, why did he call a 300-page book a short introduction? At the end of the book, it says, Epilogue. Now we are ready to start studying the history of stupidity. Nothing follows. Professor Pitkin was a very wise man. He knew that a lifetime was far too short to cover even a fragment of such a vast subject. So he published the introduction, and that was it. Pitkin was well aware of the lack of previous work in the field. He had a team of researchers hunt through the files of the Central Library in New York. They found only 2 books on the subject. Über die Dummheit by Leopold Lowenfeld in 1909 and Aus der Geschichte der menschlichen Dummheit by Max Kemmerich in 1912. Of course, there are several books that in one way or another are related to stupidity. Only a few cover the subject coherently, but some are interesting. 4 different reasons. The most relevant are quoted in Chapter 1 and in other parts of my book. Over the years, I've collected a bibliography of those that I've been able to find, and I'm updating it when something new is published that is worth mentioning. The only book that came to mind for me in that last paragraph was John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. And that the character Lenny was slow, he was retarded. And a lot of bad things happened because he was stupid. He was big and he'd hurt things being stupid. He's updating. In Pitkin's opinion, 4 people out of 5 are stupid enough to be called stupid. That was 1.5 billion people when he wrote the book. It is over 5 billion now. This in itself is quite stupid. He observed that one of the problems of stupidity is that nobody has a really good definition of what it is. In fact, geniuses are often considered stupid by a stupid majority, though nobody has a good definition of genius either. But stupidity is definitely there, and there is much more of it than our wildest nightmares might suggest. In fact, it runs the world, which is very clearly proven by the way the world is run. But somebody, 54 years later, came up with a rather interesting definition. His name is Carlo M. Cipolla, Professor Emeritus of Economic History at Berkeley. All of his books are in English, only a few are in Italian. One, Allegro ma non troppo, was published by Il Mulino in Bologna in 1988, a translation by Anna Parrish. In that book, there's a little essay called The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity, one of the best ever written on the subject. It has been published in several languages, but unfortunately, the English text is not publicly available. See a note at the end of this page. There's a very insidious program of stupidification in Western society. They need to keep the consumer stupid. So, keep them speaking English and nothing else, and don't publish the real shit in English. In part, his observations confirm existing knowledge, such as the fact that the number of stupid people is broadly underestimated. That is something that we can all notice every day. Aware as we may be of the power of stupidity, we are often surprised by its surfacing where and when we least expect it. There's a typo in there. It says where and where. Of course, then stupidity can appear simultaneously in separate places. What is missing in this perspective, as in the case of Walter Pitkin and almost every author dealing with the subject, is a consideration of our stupidity, or in any case, of the stupidity factor that exists even in the most intelligent people. The smartest people are the ones that know how stupid they are. I shall get back to that subject further on. But at this point, it's appropriate to note that the problem of stupidity lurking in all of us, generally ignored or underestimated, is correctly defined in a particularly interesting book, Understanding Stupidity by James Wells. The first edition was published in 1986, extended and developed in following years. I'm sorry to admit that when I first wrote this article in 1996, I wasn't aware of this work by James Wells. Now I can say that it's the best book I've read on the subject, the most thorough analysis. This guy's. Whoa. Why did you even put that in there, douche? He doesn't understand the workings of the Ministry of Truth. Just okay, you upgraded it, you updated it, just forget about what it was before and cut that out. You didn't have to remind us, and now it just totally blew my read. One of the key points in Carlos Sequoia's theory, as well as in the studies by James Wells, is that a person's stupidity is independent of any other characteristic of that person. This may contradict some widespread opinions, but it's confirmed by any careful analysis of the problem. This isn't some superficial way of being politically correct. It's a basic fact. It is substantially true that no human category is more intelligent or more stupid than another. There is no difference in the level and frequency of stupidity by gender, sex, race, color, ethnic background, culture, or educational level. As a matter, I don't know about that because the bullshit, more shit piled high and deep. The stupidity gets real deep when they start holding PhDs and MDs together. Ignorance may be influenced by stupidity or vice versa, but they are not the same thing. See Three Friends of Stupidity. There is a criterion in Sequoia's theory that I have adopted as a method in some of my analyses. It is defined in the one that he calls third and golden law. A stupid person is a person who causes losses to another person or to a group of persons while himself deriving no gain and even possibly incurring losses. An important advantage of this approach is that it avoids the thorny problem of trying to find, in theory, a definition of stupidity or intelligence while it evaluates its relevance in relation to practical effects. It's obvious that with this criterion, different categories of behavior can be defined. At one extreme, we find people who do good for themselves as well as for others. Therefore, we call them intelligent. At the other end of the spectrum, there are people who do harm to themselves as well as to others. Those are stupid. It's pretty obvious that there are at least two in-between categories. One that harms others while gaining self-advantage. Sequoia calls them bandits. And one where we place people who harm themselves while doing good for others. Those we call martyrs. That's the ones that Jesus was talking about suffering for righteousness' sake. I gotta get this thing taken out. It's starting to bother me bad and often. Let's tea tree oil. The definition of this last category isn't as simple as it may seem. It isn't always appropriate to call them hapless or hopeless. That may seem correct if gain or loss are measured according to simplistic criteria of classic economy. But it can be wrong when applied to people who deliberately sacrifice some of their own benefits for the good of others, as we shall see shortly after the next point. It's obvious that this sort of concept can be charted quite simply by using the classic two-dimensional Cartesian coordinate system. 4 quadrants. The horizontal abscissa x-axis, the advantage or disadvantage that someone obtains from his own or her own axis, and on the vertical ordinate y-axis, the effects other people. Any of us can find a placement based on the practical consequences of behavior where a person or a group of people is to be placed, in general or in a particular circumstance. It's obvious that behaviors in quadrant 1, top right, are at various levels of intelligence, while in quadrant 3, bottom left, it's stupidity. It's also obvious that the fourth quadrant, bottom right, is we can find different levels of banditism. But those in the second, top left, can't be so easily defined. This is one of the points in which my interpretation is somewhat different from Sequoia's definitions Another, more general difference is explained in the final comments in this article. This may be hapless or hopeless if and when they harm themselves and others without being aware of what they're doing. But the same placement in the coordinates could be the result of deliberately generous or altruistic behavior. In such cases, analysis could take one of two courses. Consider moral and social benefits, and therefore place those behaviors in the intelligent area, or leave them where they are on the left of the y-axis, but use a different definition. More on this subject is in a footnote to Stupidity of Power. Without getting into the details, that would be quite complex of what can be done with this sort of analysis. A key fact is that the evaluation of different behaviors can be done on an individual basis, one-to-one, or on a wider scale, involving large systems, nations, international communities, or even humanity as a whole, or not so wide environments, local situations, companies, associations, organized or informal groups, human communities of any sort, nature, or size. Like the population under the transgender umbrella. Oh boy. I didn't even go there in this one. There's just too much stupid. Someone got, the tranny now stuff is just, it tripped Lexi Can's trigger today. which brought a cascade of plenty of righteous indignation on a whole mess of other people. And it's all stupid. It's like, hey, individual expression, gender identity is an individual expression, and nobody, there's no standards. I'm sorry. There's no standards. Just, it's like they pick one of the quadrants. It's like, hey, I got a penis and it likes vaginas, but I'm a female in my spirit and in my nature. And I properly, I'm intersex, but there's, it's unclear because of the loss of my records of infancy and my mother's pregnancy. What really went down when I was born and before I was born. But certainly my nature is female, but my penis likes vaginas. What the fuck? Yes, I'm different. I'm having fun. Now I can be authentic about it. Of course, yeah, this is one of those instances. Of course, this confirms the basic. Well, bit. I got totally sidetracked here. Oh, okay. The system as a whole can improve or degrade as the result of a combination of several different factors, not all necessarily altruistic. But it's clear that the greatest improvement is the result of intelligent action, and the worst deterioration is caused by stupidity. In other words, if each person or group of people mind too much their own interests and don't consider the effect of their actions on everyone else, there is a general decay of society as a whole. And so also those who thought they were being smart turn out to be stupid. But it often happens that this is understood when it's too late. 2020 hindsight. This confirms the basic concept. The most dangerous factor in every human society is stupidity. And I believe stupidity results when you let your reason and your intellect overrule your instincts. If your gut says no, don't convince it otherwise, or you find yourself in the consequences of a stupid outcome. A stupid outcome of a misguided action. Of course, there are specific and often dramatic consequences when there is an unbalance of cause and effect, as in the case of actions by a few people that have an effect on many. For more on this subject, see the stupidity of power. But that's got a lot of goodies about Donnie. In the use of the coordinates, there are some differences between the approach suggested by Carlos Sepoya and the method in my reasoning. There are mainly three. Observations by Pitkin, Sepoya, and nearly everybody considering the subject are based on an assumption of total separation. Some people are intelligent and some are stupid. As we shall see shortly further, I believe that almost nobody is totally stupid and nobody can hope to always be intelligent. This is more realistic. You never know when you're going to have a stupid moment. Therefore, and a lot of stupidity is the result of ignorance, and ignorance is curable. Stupidity isn't. But if you're being stupid because you're missing data, just go get the data. Therefore, we need to consider the element of stupidity and also of other behavior patterns that exist in all of us. Go get the data. Stop arguing with your heart and your gut, and do what it tells you, and trust in its in the guidance that your instinct is trying to give you, and stop overthinking shit, and you won't do stupid stuff. Go with what your body wants you to do with, rather than what your brain is trying to. Okay, well, this seems like an interesting thing to do. Let's do that, instead of like just instantly reacting to what your heart or your gut is telling you to do. Analyses based on results can be made by trying to define a person's general behavior pattern or be limited to a particular set of circumstances. This second option is not to be excluded. It can be quite interesting to find how the same person in different situations can behave in ways that lead to different results and definitions. The obvious attitude when we work with these coordinates is to place ourselves in the x-axis and someone else in the y. But it can be very useful to do it the other way around, trying to trace the effects of our actions on other people. The difficulty lies in the fact that, of course, the quality of results is to be measured by the point of view of whoever is at the receiving end. That's that Heisenberg principle. But it's always a useful exercise to try to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, especially when we're trying to measure our level of stupidity or intelligence. This has probably been one of the most important factors in my own personal survival. It's right there. Is always considering how another person is going to feel about something I'm about to do. Try to see things from the other person's point of view before involving them in your own follies. It's a widely known fact that responsible and generous people are generally aware of how they are. Malicious and nasty people understand what they're doing, and even the weakest victims have a feeling that something isn't quite right. But stupid people don't know they are stupid, and that is one more reason why they are extremely dangerous. Which, of course, leads me back to my original agonizing question, am I stupid? I have passed several IQ tests with good marks. Unfortunately, I know how these tests work, and they don't prove anything. Several people have told me that I'm intelligent, but that doesn't prove anything either. They may simply be too kind to tell me the truth. Conversely, they could be attempting to use my stupidity to their own advantage, or they could be just as stupid as I am. I'm left with one little glimpse of hope. Quite often, I'm intensely aware of how stupid I am, or I have been, and this indicates that I'm not completely stupid. Like I said, the smartest people understand how stupid we are. The more you know, if you're like have your eyes open and your brain not fogged up with something, toxic ideals, you realize how little there is that you can know and acquire in the way of knowledge for your own self, as opposed to the universal pool that's out there. It's like, oh, there's just so much. Just don't worry. Just be happy. That's what Solomon was saying in Ecclesiastes. Most of it's vanity, and the only thing that really matters is to be content, to be at peace within yourself and comfortable in your surroundings. Okay, at times I've tried to locate myself in the Cartesian coordinates, using as far as possible measurable results of action rather than opinion as a yardstick. Depending on the situation, I seem to wander around the upper side of the graph, above the x-axis, sometimes in the quadrant on the top right, that is to say, with a relatively low or high level of intelligence. But in some cases, I'm desperately lost on the left side, hurting myself as well as others. I just hope I'm useful to others as often as I think. But I know that's impossible to never make mistakes, and that there is never any end to learning. I remember there was an old person in my family. I don't remember which one. But he's the day I stopped learning is the day they nail the coffin shut. This was his line. On a broader scale, one would expect the strongest success factors to lie in the first and fourth quadrant, that is, on the right side of the y-axis. However, the staggering number of people who belong on the other side and have wonderful careers can only be explained by a strong desire on the part of several leaders to be surrounded by as many stupid people as possible. Just look at Twitler. Sean Spicer and Kellyanne Conway, and that's just his breast base. Bigly. He's a bigly one. I'd asked him, what do you think of my... Shortly after reading his book, I wrote a letter to Carlos Sepoya. I have done this sort of thing only twice in my life. Much to my surprise, he answered briefly but kindly. I had asked him, what do you think of my corollary to your theory? The answer was, well, why not? Maybe. Which I can think can be taken as agreement and approval of Livraghi's corollary to Sepoya's first law. In each of us, there is a factor of stupidity, which is always larger than we suppose. This corollary, as those that followed, see part 2, isn't necessarily related to a single author. It could be applied, for instance, to Hanlon's razor or Finagel's law. As to any general consideration on the ubiquity of stupidity, that is often, if not always, more widespread and more dangerous than expected. This creates a three-dimensional... Oh, good, we're almost done with this. But there are 2 more parts. This creates a three-dimensional coordinate system, and I don't think I have to take you through the steps, but because no stupid or timid person would have had the courage to read this far. And certainly not out loud into a live camera. Of course, in addition to our own and other people's stupidity, we can introduce other variables, such as our own behavior factors, and there are many ways of combining with those of others. It may be wise to forget the intelligent factor, as there never is enough of that, but to consider fourth quadrant values, because even the most generous person can sometimes behave like a bandit, if only by mistake. This is what some of what Maimonides' levels of charity, righteousness was about. But sometimes you're not being so generous because you're demeaning yourself and the person you're donating something to. These additional factors generate multidimensional models that can get fairly difficult to manage. But even if we consider only our individual stupidity values, the complexity can become quite staggering. Try it for yourself and get really scared. Well, okay, I guess I have a feeling this is over 20 minutes. Oh yeah, it's almost a half hour. I think we're going to break this up into 3 readings. It's this is pretty good stuff to admit. What we have is the power. This was the power of stupidity. This is part 1. Part 2 is the power of stupidity, and part 3 is the stupidity of power. And then he's got other articles on this subject. Huh. I wonder. No, I don't know when last. He hasn't been. Apparently, they're suppressing Carlos Sepoya's work. I'll have to look into that. So there you have it. This is I got some business, so I got to check into, and I think there was some stupidity in some of the groups that I have to respond to. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. Happy day. Bye.